Well, I have a lot to say this week. First, let me just say something at the outset. Um, I know a couple of people have contacted me and asked me questions about it. We're still trying to get everything to work correctly here at our new building, and so there's going to be some technical glitches. I want you to understand that we're pretty much everybody's a volunteer here at FBC. We do have other jobs that we work, and so sometimes we don't get things ironed out perfectly. I think we're doing better than the other place where we had to set up and tear down each week. So it's been a real blessing that we don't have to do that each week. But this is much more getting this, the video, the PowerPoint, and all this sound and all this stuff to work so that people sitting here can listen to it and people online can listen to it is much more complicated than you might imagine. So if you would just please bear with us on that. Well, you may have noticed that this was a week in which it seemed like everybody had an opinion about everything. And the opinions didn't match up at all. We talk about each week, I talk about the convergence of events as we approach the return of the Lord. Sometime I'll go through and I'll explain this slide, but each of these panels has something to do with end times. For example, the second panel in the upper left-hand corner is Jesus among the seven candlesticks. Then you have the seven sealed scroll. You have Jerusalem, a cup of trending going across to the right. You have the fall of the kingdoms, the statue of Daniel, chapter 2. You have the menorah, and I've done a teaching on that about a future, you can find it online, called a future Hanukkah. And I think that there actually will be a future Hanukkah that will be celebrated in Jerusalem. The four horsemen of the apocalypse and all those things. So we'll talk about those maybe someday. I'll when I don't have a crush of everything else going on. But it is a very disruptive world. Just a reminder too, if you haven't registered, I'm going to be in the Moriel Conference at the Hayes Conference Center in Swanwick. I was told that the W is silent. Then don't put it in, right? I mean, American English is bad enough, but then they have rules, and it's silent. So it's not Sonic, it's Swanwick, because the first one is pronounced, but there's no rule book that I know of. But Israel Prophecy U will be the subject. Speaking of England, this is one of Manchester's finest, dressed and ready to go to work. Obviously, he's a information officer trying to reach out to certain groups. I think one of the most disturbing things, well, before I get to that, we often look back at ancient cultures and we think, boy, they were primitive, weren't they? This is hieroglyphics. The Egyptians used it to communicate. And there's a large number of examples of this. And so, but we're so proud, aren't we? Because we've risen above communicating like the Egyptians, haven't we? What goes around comes around. And that's why this slide, when I talk about the convergence of events, you see the upper left-hand corner, what is that? It's the Tower of Babel. Why? Because it's going to be what happens at the beginning, happens at the end. What Jesus talked about in creation and man-woman is going to be attacked at the end. They always go back and they attack the foundations. And we saw a lot of that this week. Here's just one example. I found this one disturbing. This is from the Wichita Eagle on Tuesday or Wednesday. Drag queens draw standing room crowd at library. Now, Wichita I know Wichita is not necessarily a conservative city, but this is conservative middle America. And they're drawing a standing room crowd. I've had people contact me concerned about their grandchildren who are maybe a little boy or little girl their parents are addressing them as the opposite sex. This is a much bigger problem than we can imagine. And what's the output of that going to be? We live in a world, Isaiah chapter 5 seems to apply every week. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. In Revelation chapter 2 and 3, there are 7 letters to 7 churches, 7 ecclesias that are identified by John. Now, each of these churches, the last one is the letter to the church at Laodicea, but each of these churches got a report card. It starts off with something about a title of Christ to indicate an aspect of his ministry. There's a commendation, although there are 2 churches, Sardis and Laodicea, that did not receive a commendation on their report card. There's a condemnation, although 2 churches, Smyrna and Philadelphia, did not receive condemnation. Then there's an exhortation, and there's a promise about what it says, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. But let me just look at Laodicea, because Laodicea has a special meaning, and I think it has a special applicability at this time. And unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things saith the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou were cold or hot, so then because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayst see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him, and he with me. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I overcame and am set down with my Father in his throne. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says unto the churches. And so these 7 churches were actual churches in Asia Minor, and the one at Laodicea has a specific meaning because of its geographic location. There are 2 cities near Laodicea, 10, 15, 20 miles away, Colossae and Hierapolis. And what they did was, Laodicea had no water source of its own. So there were water sources at Hierapolis and Colossae. So what they did was they brought water in from Colossae, which was nice and cold, and then there are these beautiful baths and springs at Hierapolis, and those were also brought in by aqueducts to Laodicea. The problem was that the water from Colossae was cold. The water from Hierapolis was warm from these springs, these baths, and it mixed at Laodicea, and it was lukewarm. Now, this is not true, universally true, based on my travels, but in America, for example, we like our soft drinks and soda cold. We put ice in them. And I remember we've been in Israel. You ask, could I have ice with my drink? And they will bring you a big glass with about that much ice at the bottom, often already half melted. It doesn't make it very cold. And so as a result, unless it's been refrigerated, you end up drinking lukewarm soda, which I don't particularly care for. And this is the picture of what happened at Laodicea. It was this mixture that happened. But when you tear apart the word of Laodicea, you get the word Laodicea, Leo, which means peoples, and decatso means opinion. And it was the church of people's opinions. Now, as someone, it also means the people judged. Now, if you spent much time on social media, and I do, I'll admit that, it is the world of everyone's opinion. For example, there are a number of prophecy groups that I belong to. And someone will say, hey, what do you think about this? And then everybody will cite their opinion, of which they're absolutely certain this is the way everything's going to work out, and everyone else who doesn't believe it is anything from wrong, doesn't understand Scripture, is not a Christian, or is just a raving heretic. And there's also a good idea that at the end of the age, this will be the predominant characteristic of the church. Now, I'm not sure that John wrote with that in mind, but it sure seems to have come true. Here's an example of someone's opinion about the church. I've played this many times, but here is Rob Bell with Oprah Winfrey talking about same-sex marriage in the church.
When is the church going to get that? We're close.
I think it's evolving. I think it's...
Lots of people are already there. We think it's inevitable, and we're moments.
A moment away from the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
It.
Absolutely.
Really?
You think we're moments away? I think culture is already there, and the church will continue to be even more irrelevant when it quotes letters from 2,000 years ago as their best defense. When you have in front of you flesh and blood people who are your brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and coworkers and neighbors, and they love each other and they just want to go through life with someone.
Jen Hatmaker, I don't have a clip of or a picture of it, but on her Facebook page, she came today, was that Jesus came to, I don't want to misrepresenting it, it was Jesus came for the LGBT community, essentially. He was also in the news this week. This is an older clip of Andy Stanley talking about his view. His view came out this week where essentially Christians shouldn't be worried about putting up 10 Commandment monuments because that's the old God. We don't need to worry about that. Now, if I've misstated that, I'm sure he will come out, as he always does. He makes these ridiculous statements and then he comes out and issues a clarification. So this is why I play clips of him, so that you can hear what he said. And listen, I listen to context. I don't want anybody to write to me and say, I'm taking what he said out of context. I am not taking it out of context. I'm going to play a few-minute clip here, as much as I can stand, just talking about belief. This is from, it's probably a few years ago.
In this series, but throughout the Gospels, the word that Jesus came back to over and over and over and over and again is the word that we're going to camp out on in this series, and it's simply the word follow. Second one, and this is hard to even say. Being an unbeliever doesn't disqualify you. You say, Andy, I can't follow Jesus. I don't even believe any of that stuff about Jesus, so? Listen, none of Jesus' earliest followers believed. None. In fact, when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it's so funny. 2 years in, Jesus does something, and it says, and they believed. I'm like, well, what have they been doing for 2 years? Not believing. In fact, Jesus was constantly saying, these are the guys that are with him all the time. Your unbelief. He would chastise them for their lack of belief. They're going, we're trying to believe. We're trying to believe. It doesn't matter how little faith you have, even if you have no faith. You are invited to become a follower of Jesus, which means you don't have to believe he's divine. You don't even have to believe he's historical. I just dare you to pick up a Bible and read Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, or any part and just say, you know what? I don't even believe it's necessarily real. I don't even know if he existed, but I'm going to find something in here that is within the realm of possibility for me to do. And I'm just going to be a Jesus follower that follows maybe some of the easy teachings of Jesus. I dare you to try. Jesus says, I'll take that. My invitation to follow is extended to those who aren't even sure they believe. Number 3, the invitation to follow is purely an invitation to relationship. This is huge. It's not an invitation to the 10 Commandments. It's not even an invitation to obedience. And let me tell you why this is important. If you were married to someone who obeyed all the marriage rules, and you obeyed all the marriage rules, you would not necessarily have a good relationship. I think all of us would opt to be in a relationship with somebody who breaks the rules every once in a while, but there's an actual relationship. Rules don't make a relationship. The Apostle Paul said it this way. Here's a verse that never gets any airplay. He said this, that it's actually God's kindness that leads us to repentance. I thought it was fear. Well, fear's motivating. Paul says it's not fear.
Well, as usual, if I'm going to be accused of taking him out of context, I'm going to accuse him of taking God and the Bible out of context. And I'm sure he'll issue this week, there'll be interviews done with him by people who consider them good, meaning themselves good apologists, that want to be faithful to the scriptures, and he'll be on Twitter and everything, sort of walking back what he said. It happens all the time. But I think this is indicative of a Laodicean church. I'm sort of thinking exactly what I want to say here, and I think I may just move on because I'm afraid that I will. Well, there's a digital version of this going out, so I have to be careful what I say. Go watch Pastor Steve's sermon from the first hour. That ought to, and really, if you don't like this, contact Pastor Steve. Well, this week, you may have noticed, and people have asked me to comment on this, the Supreme Court nomination of Kavanaugh and the hearings that went on in the Senate, particularly the one on Thursday involving Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who has accused him of having sexually assaulted her when she was 15. In my legal career, I have been a trial lawyer. I have taken thousands of depositions. I have undergone training from psychologists and others, law enforcement professionals that teach you to look at and read people's body languages, the way they tilt their head, where they look in a room. For example, if you ask them a difficult question, and I must confess to you, asking a difficult question, one that the witness is not anticipating, is really kind of delicious. You remember at the end of the movie, The Untouchables, where Kevin Costner, Elliot Ness, said he wanted this moment, when the bad guy from Chicago, he wanted him to, because he knew he'd really gotten to him when he did this with his tie. And this is true. This is things that you're trained to look at. In the early seminars that I went to that discussed this topic, the video examples that were used to show that someone was lying were all Bill Clinton, almost exclusively. I am quite confident that Dr. Ford's testimony will be used in future seminars on this topic. So is that clear where I stand on this? Now, I'm not so sure that Kavanaugh is the best nominee. I'm concerned that the court is now made up of people who graduated from either Harvard or Yale, and people who are pretty much either Roman Catholic or Jewish. I don't think the court's very diverse. Liberal Jewish people, maybe conservative Roman Catholics, and his opinions seem to be okay. I don't know how much his religion has influenced him. He seems to be a pretty good guy. He has come with the highest recommendations of many people. But I watched a large portion, as much as I could stand, of the hearing on Thursday, the careful questioning by the prosecutor that the Republicans had brought in, because they're in a position where they couldn't even ask her her name, because they would be accused of bullying. I mean, we have reached the depths of depravity in our political system that is beyond belief. And I saw a bunch of people posting, "Oh, this is just a distraction. No, this was not a distraction." This is what I posted. This is not a distraction. It's a revelation as to what's going on in the depth of evil that I saw, particularly on the Democrat side. And I would include Jeff Flake in the Democrat side. Just, come out of the closet, Jeff, and admit what you really are. Friday, after all these hearings took place, Flake insisted on an FBI probe. I'm pretty sure it's not going to show much of anything. The American Bar Association, which I withdrew my membership from that many, many years ago, came out with a letter insisting that that they do this investigation. They put everything on hold, even though the ABA has given Kavanaugh the highest ratings twice. Here is, I'm just going to share a few tweets about this. I kind of tried to pick up a flavor for it. There were good speeches that were made. There were good, Lindsey Graham finally is woke up and did a great job in his, this was a sham. It was very difficult for me to sit there and listen to the former mayor of San Francisco lecture people about morality. It was, I needed to get a helmet. I'm going to go to the Christ at the Checkpoint conference in a couple weeks. And I probably need to take a helmet, and only because it will contain the debris field when my head explodes. And so it did that when I heard that senator from Connecticut, Blumenthal, talk about truth. The man who lied about serving in Vietnam, talking to us and lecturing us about truth. Are you kidding me? Here's a tweet. Man in chair raises voice towards senators. Unhinged, lunatic, unfit. Women trapped senator on elevators, screams in face. Convictions, heartfelt, compassion, believe. Former director of the CIA said this, key takeaways this week. Dr. Ford is a national treasure. Senator Jeff Flake is an admirable man with a conscience, while craven politician Lindsey Graham is not. Kavanaugh's temperament and blatant partisanship are disqualifying of a Supreme. So you accuse a man of rape, of sexual assault, you drag his name through the mud, and he responds with a natural human emotion, and he is unhinged and unfit. I looked at some of the emergent blogs and Twitter accounts. One is Rachel Held Evans. She has a new book out called Inspired. She's an emergent type. In fact, she describes herself. What does she describe herself as? A doubt-filled believer. Now, setting aside for a moment the cognitive dissonance in which she resides, she posted a number of things. One of the things, to get to where she's coming from, this is very cool. What an incredible resource. Sojo.net, 100 sermons. Now that 100 sermons comes from Sojourners. Sojourners is funded by a bunch of left wings. It's run by an avowed Marxist who speaks here at one of the big churches over here in Columbus. You know which one, over on Cooper Road. And it's funded in part, large part, by George Soros. 100 sermons. In January, you invited pastors and parishioners to send us sermons on domestic and sexual violence. And you can go and you can actually put your helmet on and read them. So here's what she said, Rachel Held Ovens. Watched a little, surprised by how viscerally, how physically I'm reacting, grinding teeth, pacing, crying. But from the looks of it, I'm not alone. Patriarchy is so evil. Maybe this is unfair, but putting aside all politics, putting aside the accusation, is this the temperament we want to see from a judge on the Supreme Court? And my response is, yes, that's exactly what I want to see. And you see, what she doubts about the Bible, she doubts about Brett Kavanaugh because they're both white males to her. And listen, the left always accuses you of what they are. Always. It is a universal rule to which I am not aware of any exceptions thus far. Some women of valor on that elevator. The Kavanaugh stakes, Kim Strassel. She concludes her article in the Friday Wall Street Journal. She's a very good writer, with a long list of things, and this is just sort of the conclusion. It's authorization for, this is what happened. It's authorization for a now thoroughly unprofessional press corps to continue crafting stories that rest on anonymous accusers and that twist innuendo into gang rapes. A vote against Brett Kavanaugh is a vote for Michael Avenatti. No senator can, and did you see how these crazy allegations about this gal that I was present at 10 of these gang rapes? Parties were, why did you go? And this is all driven by emotion. And listen, I've mentioned this a number of times. I'm a trial lawyer. At one point in my career, trial lawyer seminars used to be about how to effectively present the facts. I don't know when the transition was, but it was sometime in the 90s. Those seminars changed to how to appeal to people's emotions, and maybe use facts at the same time. But get to the emotions first, because that's how you're going to win. So she says this: the stakes go even further to the core of this country's principles, Kimberly Strassel. To vote against Judge Kavanaugh now is to overthrow due process. Contrary to Democrats' claims, due process is not constrained to courts of law. It is central to employee discipline, professional standards of conduct, even evictions of tenants. It is owed to any individual in a civilized body politic. Under due process, the accuser has the burden of proof. Ms. Ford has not met the evidentiary standard even of a civil proceeding, the preponderance of evidence, more likely than not, let alone reasonable doubt. Yet this case is more significant than any that has been dealt with in a court of law for ages. How the Senate votes now will reverberate to all levels of society. A no vote on Judge Kavanaugh is an authorization to renew calls for a Justice Clarence Thomas to step down. It is an authorization to derail the life of any white-collar manager or blue-collar crew boss who is ever subject to a single uncorroborated allegation. It's hypocrites who have pushed. I did post this. If hypocrisy were people, the Democrats and Jeff Flake and his fellow Democrats would be China. Think about it. That's sort of a play on one of the best lines in City Slickers movie. It's the Democrats who have pushed the nation to its brink. It is no longer about one unvetted accusation or who looks more credible or discreet political calculations. Republicans need to understand that their voters know this goes beyond the question of one man in a Supreme Court seat. It goes to basic principles. Exactly right. And this is what's going to happen. This is Mike Allen writing in Axios. I would say Allen is probably a center left. The next ugly fight, impeachments, I can guarantee you that if Kavanaugh is confirmed and the Democrats get control of the House, he will be impeached. And he will be impeached whether he's on the Supreme Court or he will be impeached whether he stays on the Court of Appeals. This is not over. In fact, they're talking about it he goes through with a number of quotes in his article at Axios, I don't know, in the last couple days. And the Democrats are talking about this is not over, even if he's confirmed. And the only thing we can do is to get them out of Congress. That's my view. You cannot, the whole thing is, it's hard for me to form the words to describe how disgusted I am, how appalled I am, how angry I am, how much in need of a helmet I am when I talk about this. John Cass at the Chicago Tribune writes this: the illness deep within the bones of the Republic. It is tempting to watch the political spectacle of Democrats destroying Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh as if it were only some shameful partisan circus, something brutally Roman with a howling mob, blood on the sand, or something medieval like trial by ordeal, with a mace and an axe and the might of brutes as the elements of God's will. Or better yet, a drama as Spanish as the Inquisition itself. Because what we're seeing in the Kavanaugh circus isn't American, where until very recently, like a few months ago, the accused was given the presumption of innocence. All of that changed. Now the accused is forced to prove his innocence before his accusers. Did you hear the senator from Hawaii, Hirono? There's a direct quote in here from her. She said, let's see. She says, I asked by CNN's Jake Tapper if Kavanaugh should have the same presumption of innocence, in the context of everything that I know about him in terms, here's what Senator Hirono, a lawyer, said. I put his denial in the context of everything that I know about him in terms of how he approaches his cases. In other words, I'm afraid he may rule against my idle abortion, and therefore I'm going to not listen to anything that he has to say. Her testimony was, you could see when she was asked an uncomfortable question, she looked to people on the panel, she looked to her lawyers, and I think she was well prepared. And look, I think I even believe that something happened. But the question, I don't know if the question was developed well about recovered memories. I would highly recommend a show that Jan Markell and Eric Barger did. I think Jill Martin Ricci also, on Understanding the Times. Go to olivetreeviews.org. You can find the two shows from about a month ago where they talked about recovery memories that people are having. They put them through this thing. It's often called in Christian circles Bethel. Church in Reading uses something called sozo. They take a biblical word and they sort of pervert it into something else. And then theophostic prayer, which is a mix of psychology and mysticism. And families are destroyed by these false, fake, recovered memories. So even if something happened to her, I'm thoroughly convinced it was not Judge Kavanaugh. And it was implanted in her. And people say, well, why didn't they bring it up earlier? Because she didn't go through the therapy until 2012, and he was approved for the Court of Appeals in 2005. And until somebody implanted that memory in her, it wasn't there. Also, when I was in graduate school in criminology, I was a graduate assistant to one of the country's leading polygraph experts. I'm confident that the professor for whom I worked would have laughed hysterically at the polygraph results that they tried to push over as, well, she passed the polygraph test. They didn't ask any baseline questions. They only asked her a couple questions. Was that your statement that you wrote out? And was it true when you wrote it? There was no testing done. This is it's a farce. It's a sham. Insert everything Lindsey Graham said here. So let's look at, so I don't know where this will go. I'm concerned that the whole process is broken. If you're a good person, why would you put yourself through this? And this is the goal, is to get people not to step forward. And listen, I've heard there are hundreds of people waiting for confirmation from the Senate that have not had their hearings or anything yet, and it's affecting the way the government can operate. It's, I don't know. Hugh Hewitt wrote a book a couple years ago called "If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat." So beat them bad. And look, I know I don't want to receive any emails or comments about it on YouTube channel that, oh, I'm putting all my faith and hope in America and our government. And I'm not, okay? I know that Jesus Christ is the only hope, but look, we're supposed to occupy till he comes. And we're supposed to be salt and light. So if you want to sit in your room and judge everybody else, other people for trying to make the world a better place, then go right ahead. But don't do it on my Facebook page or my YouTube channel, because I've had it. In the United Kingdom, the Labour Party had their conference this week. I'm going to play a clip of Jeremy Corbyn speaking, the leader of the Labour Party in Great Britain, speaking at their annual conference. He's been the subject of all kinds of allegations of anti-Semitism, hangs out with Hamas people, and he went through a very impassioned, we're not anti-Semitic, we're the most pro-Jewish people in the world. And so he's a man of the left. So what's the presumption? He's lying. His lips are moving, he's lying. But this is what he said about Israel and Palestine.
Let me say a few words about the ongoing denial of justice and rights to the Palestinian people. Our party is united in condemning the shooting of hundreds of unarmed demonstrators in Gaza by Israeli forces and the passing of Israel's discriminatory nation-state law. The continuing occupation, the expansion of illegal settlements, and the imprisonment of Palestinian children are an outrage. We support a two-state solution to the conflict with a secure Israel and a viable and secure Palestinian state. But a quarter of a century on from the Oslo Accords, we are no closer to justice or peace, and the Palestinian tragedy continues while the outside world stands by. As my great Israeli friend, the late Uri Avnery, who sadly died a short while ago, put it to me, what is the alternative to peace? A catastrophe for both peoples. And in order to help make that two-state settlement a reality, we will recognize a Palestinian state as soon as we take office.
Now, I want you to see what happens here in the crowd. You see the flags waving? Somebody noted there were more Palestinian flags than British Union Jacks. There's a good article. Now I'm trying to remember where I found this. Oh, it's in the, I think it's at the Spectator UK magazine. And I think it's written by Douglas Murray. Does Corbyn know who wrote this about Jerusalem? Now, there was someone who posted a video on their Twitter account of what happened, but just listen to the article as you watch the flags waving at the Labour rally. In the main Labour Party conference hall in Liverpool on Wednesday, it seemed there were more Palestinian flags being waved than at a Hamas rally in Gaza or at the opening session of the Palestinian parliament in Ramallah. The vote by party members to debate Palestine was the fourth most popular after housing, schools, and justice for the Windrush generation. The subject of Palestine gained more votes, 188,000, than Brexit and the National Health Service. The chanting by labor activists included the Hamas and Islamic Jihad slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free." From the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, including Tel Aviv, all of Israel should be destroyed. One of the many lies told about Israel among left-wing labor activists is that there were almost no Jews there before the Holocaust. They then cite an article written in 1854 in the New York Tribune, and this is what the article says. But I wonder how many of them, including Jeremy Corbyn, know who wrote the following in 1854. This is a quote. "The sedentary population of Jerusalem numbers about 15,500 souls, of whom 4,000 are Muslims and 8,000 Jews." 1854. Jews outnumber Muslims 2 to 1. This article from 1854 continues. "The Muslims, forming about a fourth part of the whole and consisting of Turks, Arabs, and Moors, are, of course, the masters in every respect, as they are no way affected with the weakness of their government at Constantinople. Nothing equals the misery and the sufferings of the Jews at Jerusalem, inhabiting the most filthy quarter of the town called Hareth el Yahud, the quarter of dirt between the Zion and the Moriah, where the synagogues are situated, the constant objects of Muslim oppression and intolerance, insulted by the Greeks, persecuted by the Latins, and living only upon the scanty alms transmitted by their European brethren." Who wrote that? The answer is that article was written by Karl Marx. The hero of the left, the hero of oppression. This is a picture, you can turn the sound down on this. This is a news conference yesterday, or the other day, Friday I believe it was, in Germany, between Erdogan and Merkel, and that was a Turkish journalist who had a sign, "Free Journalist in Turkey" on, a t-shirt on, and he was removed by Turkish guards in Germany under the nose of the leader of Germany. Shocking. It's just shocking. So this article continues. Let's see here. Oh, this is Douglas. The other one, I don't. That was in the Jewish Chronicle. A great article. The one that I was referring to. This one is by Douglas Murray. "What does an illegal migrant have to? This is in the Spectator. Have to do to get deported from Sweden?" This is what Douglas Murray says. "I refer to the case of the 22-year-old Palestinian whose asylum case has recently been causing news in Scandinavia. The man, whose name has not been released, entered Sweden illegally in 2016. The Swedish Migration Agency considered his application for asylum the same year and decided that he has no grounds for asylum. A deportation order was even approved. But as in so many other European countries, there is nothing wrong with being an illegal immigrant in Sweden. The authorities rarely bother to do anything about legal migrants, even when they are ruled not to have any right to remain. And this seems to be the situation here. This is what happened. It happened in Gothenburg, Sweden, last December in the aftermath of President Trump's announcement that the American embassy in Israel would finally be moving from Tel Aviv to the Israeli capital, Jerusalem. The announcement was actually a very small matter, but one which we were promised by the usual media experts would have such profound implications for the Middle East. Indeed, across the news channels, we were warned that this was an event of such magnitude that the fabled Arab Street would at once rise up. Citizens getting barrel bombed in Homs would come out of their buildings saying, "Hold it, have you heard about the outrage going on in Jerusalem?" This is satire. This is humor. The citizens of Yemen would come out of their bunkers and say, enough of this nonsense. Have you heard about the planning dispute up north? And so on. Well, it didn't happen. This 22-year-old person was released. Here's what he says. They can't deport him because the Court of Appeal said you can't deport this person who did a terrorist attack. Of course, there are enough examples of such madness to fill a book. But this latest paradox really is, for connoisseurs of the genre, one of the finest for some time. So it's a very good article. You should look it up and read it. It starts off with a very nice story. It says that, see what I'm trying to, if you get on a plane, you have like a 1 in 20 million chance of someone on the plane being on the plane with a bomb. And if the chances, though, that you would get on a plane where 2 people had bombs are 1 in 20 billion. So he said if you think that there's going to be someone on the plane with a bomb, carry a bomb, and your chances of there something happening actually go down. So Douglas Murray is a funny guy. Well, let's look at what's going on in the Middle East. There's a lot of controversy about, we talked last week about the Russian plane that was down. Russia says they're going to send in their S-300 missiles and missile systems to Syria. There are people that are concerned about that. I think the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli Defense Forces probably know how to deal and jam the systems on the S-300. You may not remember, but back in 2000, was it 2005, 6, 7, when the Israeli Air Force, 2 jets from the Israeli Air Force flew up the Mediterranean coast, across by Syria, cut across southern Turkey, came down, dropped their extra fuel tanks, and they bombed the nuclear reactor along the Euphrates River there in Syria and destroyed it. They never had a shot fired at them. And it was very interesting because at the time, Syria had just installed the most advanced Russian radar system. But Israel somehow figured out how to make it, to blind it so it couldn't see. Now this may happen. Netanyahu came out and said, look, if you do this, we're going to take out we'll take it out. We'll take out the system. And that makes everything in the Middle East even more precarious than it was before. Because Israel's not going to stand by and let things happen. Lavrov, this is the front page of the Jerusalem Post this morning, said, we're going to put these missiles there, this system. This week was also the UN. I'm going to play a couple clips from the UN. Here is, see if I have anything on here. This is President Trump. Oh, I know what happened. I forgot to put in the second part of what he said. The first part. Well, here's the second part.
This year, we also took another significant step forward in the Middle East in recognition of every sovereign state to determine its own capital. I moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. The United States is committed to a future of peace and stability in the region, including peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. That aim is advanced, not harmed, by acknowledging the obvious facts. America's policy of principled realism means we will not be held hostage to old dogmas, discredited ideologies, and so-called experts who have been proven wrong over the years, time and time again.
Well, his speech against globalism raised a lot of people's ire, one of which was Erdogan. He came and gave a speech. I don't have time to go into what he had to say. Macron of France he took a swipe at Trump. and said trampling on Palestinians won't resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And he said this: what can resolve the crisis between Israel and Palestine? Not unilateral initiatives, is what Macron said. Trump also, after he spoke and before Netanyahu spoke, he had a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the reports out of that were that, look, Trump says I back a two-state solution. I think that's what will work best. Now, whether it's realistic or not, I don't think so. I think most of the world thinks that it is. And my personal opinion is that this may be shoved down Israel's throat at some point. Whether that would work or not, I don't know. I'm just saying I wouldn't put it past somebody like Macron. Remember, Obama and the UN and everybody else tried to do that back in December of 2016 after the election and before Trump took office. Here's what Trump said in his meeting with, well, first they interviewed King Abdullah of Jordan about that, and here's what he said.
You have concerns about the peace process and recent moves.
Well, look, the president from day one was committed to a fair and balanced deal for the Israelis and Palestinians to move the process forward. We're not too sure what the plan is. That's part of the problem. So it's more difficult for us to be able to step in and help. What I'm worried about is we're going to go from the two-state solution to a one-state solution, which is a disaster for all of us in the region, including Israel. If most of the final status issues are being taken off the table, then you can understand Palestinian frustration. So how do we build the bridges of confidence between the Palestinians and the United States? Because whatever people say, you cannot achieve a two-state solution or a peace deal without the role of the Americans. So at the moment, the Americans are speaking to one side, not speaking to the others. And so that's the impasse that we're at.
President Trump, if there's anything, is pretty blunt.
So exactly, and I think that's the breath of fresh air. The president sort of, as I said, look, if we go to the one-state solution, here are the problems that we're all going to face. And he was like, wait a second. And he went from A to Z like that. I was like, okay, fantastic. He went straight through the problem, came to the solution, and we looked at each other and said, okay, we need to work on the two-state solution. The one-state solution, I think, is a major problem for how Israel presents itself and internally how it presents itself, because the reality is that we're talking about apartheid. And that, I think, there's a lot of supporters of Israel outside of Israel that are really concerned, are they heading in the right direction? Now, can we get the two-state solution on track? Can we find an amiable and fair solution between the two others? Because the one-state solution frightens the heck out of all of us.
Well, just a couple comments about that. Look, he is in a very precarious position. He has to keep about 72% of his country is Palestinian. He has a tremendous number of Syrian refugees. But I will just note historically this. One, there has been a two-state solution. It's called Israel and Jordan. That was the two-state solution. The Palestinian thing was never really created until the 60s with Yasser Arafat. And its goal has always been to destroy Israel, get rid of the Jews. I mean, there's just no other way around it. Also, with regard to Jeremy Corbyn's statement that anything other than a two-state solution is a catastrophe, I would suggest to you that there is also one other solution. It's called victory. This negotiating with your enemies before they're defeated seems to be a no-win situation. That's just my opinion. Here is exactly what President Trump said in his little press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu in New York, along with some comments from Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Very much. It's great to be with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and his representatives. Obviously, we have much to discuss. The Prime Minister was just thanking me again for what we did in Jerusalem with respect to the embassy. That's been something that I guess was controversial, but it's turned out to be very positive in many ways. We are very much in favor of what Israel is doing as far as their defense is concerned. They're aggressive, and they have no choice but to be aggressive. It's a very difficult part of the world, so I just want to let Benjamin, let all of the people know, let Bibi know that We are with you. We are with Israel 100%. Thank you, baby. Thank you.
This is the first time that we meet after the American embassy has been moved to Jerusalem.
Right.
You've changed history, and you've touched our hearts. And for last, I want to say how much I appreciate your robust defense of Israel's right of self-defense, which you've just expressed. I think everybody should understand that Israel will continue to do what is necessary to defend ourselves against Iranian aggression in Syria, in Lebanon, anywhere else. And I want to say also that we have no doubt that as we do so, we'll enjoy the support of President Donald Trump and the United States of America.
Mr. President, when are you going to present your peace plan?
Mr. President, can you tell us what
We're working along on that. It's, I think, moving very well. There's nothing I would rather do than see peace between Israel and the Palestinians. I think lots of good things are happening. It will take a little time, as you know. It's taken plenty of time, many decades, and nothing's happened. But a lot of good things are happening. Actually, by taking off the table the embassy moving to Jerusalem, that was always the primary ingredient as to why deals couldn't get done. I spoke to many of the negotiating teams, and they said they could never get past the embassy moving into Jerusalem and all of what that meant, which you know what that meant. That meant everything. And now that's off the table. Now that will also mean that Israel will have to do something that will be good for the other side. We're working on deals. I think that I really believe something will happen. They say it's the toughest of all deals. When they talk about tough deals, they always say Israel and the Palestinians. That's the toughest of all deals. It is a dream of mine to be able to get that done prior to the end of my first term. I don't want to do it in my second term. The time is moving, and that will move, and I think it'll start moving pretty soon, pretty rapidly. Thank you.
Mr. President, when you said that Israel will have to pay now after having the embassy moved, what do you mean?
Well, that's a big chip that they got. I took probably the biggest chip off the table. And so obviously we have to start, we have to make a fair deal. We have to do something. Deals have to be good for both parties. Otherwise you don't have a deal and you don't have a lasting deal. So something will have to be done, but that's a very big chip. Israel got the first chip, and it's a big one. There's no question about it.
Will your plan include a two-state solution?
I like two-state solution.
Yes.
I like two-state.
So your plan is going to say two-state solution?
You just heard me, right? Okay. So that's enough questions for you. Is that all right?
So Prime Minister Netanyahu also went and talked at the UN, and he talked about a couple of topics, and he mentioned that, sort of alluded to that in his press conference meeting with President Trump about Iran and Syria, Lebanon, elsewhere. And here's a couple clips of his speech at the UN.
We oppose it. We oppose it because the deal was based on a fundamental lie that Iran is not seeking to develop nuclear weapons. Now, Israel exposed that lie earlier this year. Last February, Israel conducted a daring raid on Iran's secret atomic archive. We obtained over 100,000 documents and videos that had been stashed in vaults in an innocent-looking building in the heart of Tehran. In May, I presented a short summary of what we obtained to the international media. I provided hard evidence of Iran's plans to build nuclear weapons and its plans to deceive the international community.
Then he went on to discuss some more about Lebanon.
I'm disclosing for the first time that Iran has another secret facility in Tehran, a secret atomic warehouse for storing massive amounts of equipment and material from Iran's secret nuclear weapons program. In May, we exposed the site of Iran's secret atomic archive. It's right here, in the Shorabad district of Tehran. Today, I'm revealing the site of a second facility, Iran's secret atomic warehouse. It's right here, in the Turkuzabad district of Tehran, just 3 miles away. Let me show you exactly what the secret atomic warehouse looks like. Here it is. You see, like the atomic archive, it's another innocent-looking compound. Now, for those of you at home using Google Earth, this no longer secret atomic warehouse is on Meir Alley, Meir Street. You have the coordinates. Now, the Iranian officials cleaning out that site still have a lot of work to do, because they've had at least 15 ship containers. They're gigantic. 15 ship containers full of nuclear-related equipment and materials stored there. Now, since each of those containers can hold 20 tons of material, this means that this site contained as much as 300 tons of nuclear-related equipment and material. Right here. Why did Iran keep a secret atomic archive and a secret atomic warehouse? Because after all, when South Africa and Libya, when they gave up their nuclear programs, the first thing they did was to destroy both the archives and the material and equipment. And the answer to the question is simple. The reason Iran didn't destroy its atomic archive and its atomic warehouse is because it hasn't abandoned its goal to develop nuclear weapons. Now, I also have a message today for the tyrants of Tehran. Israel knows what you're doing, and Israel knows where you're doing it. Israel will never let a regime that calls for our destruction to develop nuclear weapons. Not now, not in 10 years, not ever.
Then he did talk, that I was one slide ahead of myself, then he did talk about Lebanon.
Think about this. The same week, Iran was caught red-handed trying to murder European citizens. European leaders were rolling out the red carpet for President Rouhani, promising to give Iran even more money. I'm a historian's son. I have to ask. I ask it not merely as a historian's son, I ask it as a Jew, as a citizen of the world, as someone who's lived through the 20th century. Have these European leaders learned nothing from history? Will they ever wake up? Well, we in Israel, we don't need a wake-up call, because Iran threatens us every day. In Syria, Iran is trying to establish permanent military bases against us and has already launched missiles and drones into our territory. In Gaza, Iran is arming terror groups to launch rocket attacks into our cities and terror attacks against our civilians. In Lebanon, Iran is directing Hezbollah to build secret sites to convert inaccurate projectiles into precision-guided missiles, missiles that can target deep inside Israel within an accuracy of 10 meters. Hezbollah listen to this. Hezbollah is deliberately using the innocent people of Beirut as human shields. They've placed 3 of these missile conversion sites along Beirut's international airport.
Not to mention the golf course up there.
Here's a picture that's worth 1,000 missiles. Here's Beirut's international airport. Here's the first missile site. It's in the Uzai neighborhood, on the water's edge, a few blocks away from the runway. Here's the second site. It's underneath a soccer stadium. That's the soccer stadium, 2 blocks away. And here's the third site. It's adjacent to the airport itself, right next to it. So I have a message for Hezbollah today. Israel also knows what you're doing. Israel knows where you're doing it. And Israel will not let you get away with it.
Also, Brian, if you could zoom that slide out just for a second to show the newspaper there in the right-hand corner. There you go. You see that picture there? It's a billboard in Tehran, in a city in Iran. I don't know which one, but you see the billboard. It's showing 3 soldiers. A bit of a controversy in Iran about that billboard. They looked for 3 fit, good-looking soldiers, and they actually found a photograph. Now, one problem was that the photograph that they got had 4 soldiers. The one on the right, which has been photoshopped out, I've seen the original photograph, was a female. Can't do that in Iran. Mullahs don't like that. The other problem is the billboard's been removed. Those 3 soldiers are soldiers of the IDF. Oops. It's one of those delicious little moments in world history. So look, a lot of things happen in the Middle East this week. A lot of things happen in politics here. The world, it's a world of everybody's opinions. There's so much more I could go into, but it is stressful world to live in. We know how it ends, though. We know what will redeem culture and society and the world, and that's the gospel. The only thing that will work. And look, while I support and I will spend some time on a good Supreme Court justice nominee and that type of thing, ultimately it's the gospel of Jesus Christ and only the gospel of Jesus Christ that will save individual people in the world. I think we're past the tipping point, and the only resolution to the Middle East, to American politics, to European insanity, to all of these problems all over the world is ultimately the return of Jesus Christ and setting up of his kingdom here on earth. He will take care of it. We are to occupy until he comes, share the gospel until he comes. Let's pray. Father, again, we're so grateful that you gave us a roadmap, indicators, signposts to understand and make sense of the turmoil that we see swirling around us. Let us use that, or help us to use that with the power of your Holy Spirit to share the gospel with people and to disciple them, and to be bold to speak out against false teaching and evil when we see it, and call it for what it really is. But always keep in mind that we look forward to the return of Jesus Christ to set up his kingdom. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.